Okay, let's start. Hi everyone again. My name is Freddy Veloz. I'm part of the board of Wikimedia LGBT, and I'm also part of Wikimedistas de Ecuador, both user groups. Usually my work on Wikipedia centers about queer history, particularly from the Global South, also about literature. And my topic today is using Wikisource to build an open queer library. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, but first of all, what is Wikisource? I mean, we've had a lot of talk. We've talked about Wikipedia, we've talked about Wikidata, we've talked about Wikisource. But as you know, the Wikimedia Foundation has other projects. Some of them are, I mean, they're definitely smaller than the other ones. So I would say that Wikisource is kind of like the less well-known sibling of Wikipedia. But basically, the general idea is that it's kind of a digital library. It aims to host all texts that have a free license. A bit of history about it. Wikisource was created in 2003. Originally, the main purpose was to have historical text. It was kind of like a sister project to Project Gutenberg. You might know Project Gutenberg. It was I mean, it still exists, but it's a page that hosts free, like literature with free
Freddy,
license. Yeah,
Freddy, sorry. Can you go a little bit slowly?
yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So the idea was that Wikisource was going to be able to complement the work from Project Gutenberg, but eventually the scope of Wikisource increased and went from historical text to also include any kind of published work that were in the public domain. So currently, Wikisource has 81 active subdomains, which means one subdomain per each language. But besides that, there's also an incubator in which there are it hosts text from all the different languages that haven't had their own subdomain at this point. Like currently, it has across all the languages, it has more than 6 million pages, although this can vary because I mean, sometimes when you're talking about literature works, you can have something like a poetry book, and then there comes like the debate: is a poetry book a work itself, or are each one of the poems in a poetry book a work in of itself? So like the number can vary, but in general, there are like about 6 million pages across all wiki sources. And as of October 2025, there are almost 4K active users. And yeah, like to create like these different works, users can just create them directly, kind of like the same interface that we have in Wikipedia, or people can actually proofread scan books, which I will show you in a bit. But in general, the idea is, I mean, Wikisource hosts all kind of published works that are in the public domain, whether it's historical books or literature, etc. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, the idea, why do we actually need an open query library? Okay, there are like many reasons. The first of all, and I would say the one that is most important, like in the current times, is that queer books in libraries are being attacked at an unprecedented rate, and we need like some kind of digital spaces to supplement this issue. Like as you have seen in the news, like right now, queer books are being attacked and they are being banned in libraries across the world, particularly in countries like the US and the UK, but also in countries from the global south. Like I was reading the reports from the American Library Association. They always publish a list of the most banned books in the country. Like for the past few years, every single book in their top five have had queer topics on them. So we're having this issue in which I mean, we aim to create spaces where we have representations, not only for adults but also for teenagers that want to feel, that want to see like stories about people like themselves. But we are living in a time in which these kinds of books in particular are being attacked and banned. So like the need arises to try to create other alternatives in which people can actually find the works that they want to read. Another reason the why we need a digital queer library is because usually books from the global south are underrepresented. For instance, when we talk about queer literature, you are usually gonna hear about the same names. For instance, I don't know, like Gore Vidal, like Oscar Wilde. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Oscar Wilde in particular. When I was a teenager, I mean, I was obsessed with him. I mean, I must have read The Picture of Dorian Gray like maybe 10 different times. So I was really a fan. But I also asked myself, maybe one of the reasons that what that happened was because he was one of the only queer authors that I had access to because there was no information about queer authors from Latin America or Africa or Asia. There was almost nothing. So when we talk about queer literature, we always get the same names. And I mean, it could be a coincidence, who knows? But almost all of them are gay white men for the global north. There are a few exceptions, but it's usually just the same names. And people from the global south are never in those lists. And also women, both lesbian women and trans women, are never on those lists. So when we create a queer library, we have the opportunity to build it consciously, trying to close those gaps, and also like adding representation from other uh, uh, like parts of society that have been underrepresented. We've done a lot of work for that on Wikipedia, but I feel that when talking about Wikisource and talking about both literature and historical texts, we haven't done a good job about that. And the last thing that why we need this is because I mean there is a deadline. This is something like common in the entire Wikimedia movement, but we know that text, particularly queer-related texts, are slowly fading into obscurity. There are like so many books and historical records about our lives, about how we live, that are just probably rotting in some libraries. And every day that passes that we don't make an effort to preserve that knowledge, we are losing some of that knowledge, and there's no way to get them again. So there is a deadline to try to fix this issue. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Fred, please can you go a little bit slowly?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Another thing good about this is that this actually could allow us to rediscover queer history. As we know, I mean, there are a lot of great academics that have done work to try to uncover queer history, but compared to other areas of knowledge, queer history is very, very much underrepresented, particularly in the global south. Talking about the case of Ecuador, for instance, I was doing like some research and I found out that you can find more academic papers about coins, like all coins in Ecuador, than about queer history. And I mean, don't get me wrong, coins are great. It's fascinating to know about them. But the point is that there is really not that much academic interest about our history. And the idea is that preserving all these ancient texts and records can help us discover some of our history that has been lost. And here I have a great example. If you read all the if you read the information about how homosexuality was criminalized in Ecuador, in all the sources that I could find, the date that is shared is 1871. That's like the date in which a new penal code was approved in Ecuador and when homosexuality was criminalized. But when I started like going through all the ancient laws of Ecuador with the aim of like uploading them to Wikisource, I actually found an amendment to Ecuador's penal code from 1869, which is the one on the right, in which delitos nefandos, which could be translated to English as crimes against nature, were criminalized. So, like, just by looking at the ancient text, I found out that all the sources about the criminalization of homosexuality in Ecuador were actually wrong because people just didn't look deep enough about that. And you could say that, okay, it's just 2 years, 71 compared to 69. But I believe this is important. I believe this is our history that is slowly getting lost. This is just an example that I could find after a day of looking through these old documents. But who knows how many other instances there are of queer history that we're slowly losing because we don't have all of these records digitalized. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so there's a need to create a digital library. There is a need to digitalize queer content, either historical or literature. Why Wikisource? I have to say that everyone loves it. As I'm actually the only bureaucrat from the Spanish Wikisource, and I would say that for people that haven't tried editing in Wikisource, you should do it. It's really nice and it's also really easy. As you know, when we are trying to teach people to use Wikipedia, you have to go through like workshops. You have to teach them about how to use reference. You have to teach them about like the guide styles and everything. So there can be like a big curve of learning to be able to for a new editor to edit in Wikipedia. But Wikisource, on the other hand, is extremely easy. There's some complex work at the beginning when you are like uploading the digitalized copies, the digitalized scan copies of books and stuff like that, and also creating the indexes. But once you have done that, the work is extremely easy. Like on the right of this slide, you can see how kind of like the proofread interface work. So basically you have just like the picture of one page of the book, and on the right, you have the text that was auto-generated by the model of Wikipedia. So the only thing the user have to do is just go through that text and correct any kind of mistakes that there is. It's an extremely easy word. It's basically just like a word interface, and people can go one by one through all the pages and do this work. So if you are thinking about new projects for people that have never been accustomed to any kind of Wikimedia projects, I challenge you to try some kind of project in Wikisource, because you're gonna find that the learning curve is extremely low, and that people can start making contributions really fast and actually see that their contribution is having an impact with, for instance, with the proofread tool. Can we go to the next slide? And yes, Matthew, yeah, there are like some more complex stuff like diagrams and stuff, but for normal text, which is usually what is included in all their historical texts, it's very, very easy, and people get like very motivated, and they usually come back for projects related to Wikisource. So some project ideas about how can we improve queer content in Wikisource, and how can we start building a queer library in it. So for instance, one thing could be creating repositories for queer historical and court documents. You can also use Wikipedia list for this. This is something that we just started working on the Spanish Wikipedia. So on the right, you can see a table with a number of landmark court cases related to queer rights in Ecuador that I created in the Spanish Wikipedia. And the idea would be creating one of these for each country, both in Latin America and in other countries, and then making sure that every one of them are also digitalized in Wikisource, so people can have direct access from the Wikipedia list about the court cases to the actual text of the court rulings. Another idea could be improving or creating LGBT portals, which can work as kind of like the land page for this idea of creating a queer library. I will show you in a second how that looks in Spanish. Another idea could be using Wikidata generated lists for getting like different works from queer authors that are in the public domain. There are like so many queer writers that are already in the public domain and that have no work of them already uploaded to Commons or digitalized in Wikisource. So using Wikidata list is a great way to having a list of work to do in the future. Another idea could be having proofread monthly challenges. We have a lot of this in Wikipedia, but as I mentioned, considering that proofreading in Wikisource is extremely easy, another thing that communities could do is selecting a queer book or a queer historical document in 1 month and having it as a challenge, completing the proofreading of that book. Another thing could be the Wiki 99 initiative. Yeah, let me try to go a bit fast. Another thing could be the Wiki 99 initiative. As you know, that one aims to have like all the different Wikipedia articles that you could have, that every single Wikipedia should have. But another thing could be having all the literary works related to queer authors that should be on every single wiki source, and then start to try to complete them across languages. And another important thing is to do it by country. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is an example of the Spanish LGBT portal that I mentioned you. We created this earlier this year. We tried to divide it, like including like works for different categories. We also tried to have an extract from famous queer works. We also tried to have the last queer document that we've proofread, and also like some documents that have already been uploaded to Commons that are ready to proofread on Wikisource. But this is an idea of something that how it could work. We try to make it kind of like visually pleasing, but there are many ideas of how this could look. Next one, please, which should be the last one. And the other thing is that there are a lot of queer authors that are waiting to be read. Like just as you know, like rules about public domain vary by country. Some have like 100 years rules, 80 years, etc. But just as an example, these are all the authors that in theory, depending on the country, could be on the public domain based on the year of birth. Like 100 years ago, Amy Lowell died, so all of her works are in the public domain. You also have some authors that died 80 years ago, some author that died 70 years ago, some author that died 50 years ago. But the idea is that every single year there are new queer authors that are entering the public domain and that could be uploaded to Wikisource. Can you go next, please?
We're going to have to cut you in a couple of
Yeah.
minutes, Freddy.
Oh,
Perfect.
that's actually it. And yeah, thank you so much. That was my presentation. Hopefully you can also start doing some projects in Wikisource. And if you want to work collaboratively, you can also contact us to see how we can do across multiple languages.